They say that in the silence after a storm, you finally hear the things you were too busy to listen to. April 2026. The terrible news of the tour collapse was still echoing through the industry. The $200 million empire was gathering dust in a holding account. And Billie Eilish, for the first time in her adult life, was truly, deeply alone in her Highland Park home. The world thought the story was over. We thought Nat Wolff had vanished into the shadows of his own life. But last night, everything changed. A single delivery arrived at Billie's door, not from a lawyer, not from a publicist, but from Nat himself. And, according to those inside the house, Billie Eilish cried in complete disbelief for hours. It wasn't a bribe. It wasn't a contract. It was a gesture so pure. It shattered the bad guy persona forever. Tonight, we're revealing the contents of the box that changed everything. To understand the disbelief, you have to understand what was inside. It wasn't jewelry. It wasn't a grand declaration of love. It was a collection of hundreds of cassette tapes. Raw, unedited recordings of every conversation, every laugh, and every quiet melody they had shared over the last year. Nat hadn't wiped the drives like the rumors suggested. He had spent the weeks of their separation meticulously transferring their digital life onto analog tape. Why? Because he knew Billie. He knew that in her world of digital noise and social media vitriol, she needed something she could hold. Something that couldn't be deleted. Something that didn't belong to the Billie Eilish brand, but to the girl he knew. The gesture was a mirror. He was giving her back the versions of herself that she thought she had lost to the ghost tour. The complete disbelief hit when Billie played the final tape. Pause. Narrator, it wasn't a song. It was a recording from the night of the Burbank meltdown, the night we all thought was the end. On the tape, after the shouting had stopped and the door had closed, you can hear Nat whispering to an empty room. He wasn't angry. He was praying for her. He was saying that he would wait as long as it took for her to realize that she didn't have to be broken to be brilliant. Billie reportedly collapsed when she heard it. She realized that while she was busy pushing him away to protect her art, he was the only one actually protecting the artist. The terrible news wasn't that they broke up. It was that she had almost thrown away the only person who saw her clearly. Suddenly, that Valentine's Day post feels like a lifetime ago. Happy Valentine's Day, I've broken so many hearts, and I won't stop, have a good one. When she wrote those words, she was convinced that breaking hearts was her destiny. She thought pain was the only honest currency she had left. But Nat Wolff's gesture proved her wrong. He didn't respond to her breaking hearts with anger. He responded with a memory of who she was before the world got its hands on her. The disbelief comes from the fact that someone actually stayed. Someone actually looked at the bad guy and saw a girl worth waiting for. For the first time since March, the crying isn't about the loss. It's about the overwhelming shock of being truly, unconditionally loved. As of this morning, the studio lights in Highland Park are back on, but the music is different. The ghost tour is still canceled, but a new project is reportedly in the works. Not a solo masterpiece of isolation, but a collaborative celebration of what it means to be found. Nat Wolff hasn't officially moved back in, but the tapes are playing on a loop in every room of the house. Billie Eilish is finally at peace with the silence, because she knows it's no longer empty. Was this the gesture that finally saved Billie? Or is the road to recovery still long? Drop your thoughts below. We're all witnessing the rebirth of an icon. They say that in the music industry, you don't know who your friends are until the lights go out. By early April 2026, the lights had been out for Billie Eilish for a long time. The ghost tour was a memory. The $200 million empire was an empty promise. And the relationship with Nat Wolff was supposedly buried under the weight of 1,000 tabloid headlines. But last night, the silence was broken. Not by a tweet, not by a leak, but by a single wooden box left on the doorstep of Billie's home. Inside that box was the gesture that has left Billie Eilish crying in complete disbelief. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a request to come back. It was something far more powerful.
Tonight,
We're looking at the gift that finally broke the bad guy. To understand the disbelief, you have to understand what Billie had lost. During the Burbank meltdown in February, rumors circulated that Nat Wolff had deleted the master files of the album they had spent 6 months recording together. The world thought he had destroyed her work out of spite, but the box on the doorstep contained a single, gold-plated hard drive. Nat hadn't deleted the music. He had spent the last month of their separation mixing and mastering it in total secrecy. He didn't want the credit. He didn't want the royalties. He reportedly included a note that said, "This belongs to the world, even if I don't belong in yours anymore." Narrator: he finished the work he started. Not for the money, but because he refused to let Billie's genius be silenced by their heartbreak. When Billie plugged in that drive, she didn't just hear music. She heard herself. Narrator: she heard the version of Billie Eilish that only Nat knew how to capture. The raw, unfiltered, and deeply vulnerable vocals that she was too afraid to release during the Ghost tour. She reportedly cried in complete disbelief because she realized that while she was busy building walls to protect her art, Nat was the only one actually building a bridge to save it. He gave her back her voice at the exact moment she thought she had lost it forever. She couldn't believe he stayed up all those nights finishing her vision, a source close to the family whispered. She thought he hated her. Instead, he was her biggest fan from the shadows. Suddenly, that February 14th post feels like a message from a different person. "Happy Valentine's Day, I've broken so many hearts, and I won't stop, have a good one."
when she wrote that,
She was bracing for a war. She expected Nat to fight back. She expected him to be the villain her story needed. But Nat Wolff's gesture completely disarmed her. By being kind when she was cruel. By being selfless when she was guarded. He proved that breaking hearts isn't a victory. The disbelief comes from the realization that she didn't have to be a bad guy to be loved. For the first time in 2026, the tears aren't about the terrible news. They're about the shock of a grace she didn't think she deserved.